Hey guys, good morning. Welcome to Reaper Pro Tips. Today is weird. Justin has been sucked into a very important ReaperCon meeting, so there is no Justin today until probably the end. I might have to text him. And we may have a key emergency later, so you guys may have to entertain yourself for 5 minutes. We'll see. I'm crossing fingers. Trying to go now. I used a synthetic brush, but it was a weird synthetic brush. I was using a very big, fat synthetic brush. This guy. Yeah, it's a Monday, Margaret. It really is. It is. I've got all sorts of dog politics going on in my dog club as well, so fun, because I'm on the board. That means I'm in the middle of all of it. But yeah, so don't worry, Cornico. I wouldn't say never, because you never know. I may actually try to use a synthetic round at some point to show you guys how much better a Kolinsky is. But in my opinion, you should just buy a Kolinsky if you don't have one and compare the two directly, and you'll see very much more than I could ever show you. But yeah, for big work though, for big flat work or on terrain, I absolutely say gigantic flat brush, or in this case, slightly rounded brush. I forget if this is a filbert or what it is, but has that slightly shovelly tip. Yeah. Haha. Yeah, well. Hello, everybody. Hey, it's Reaper Dave. We have a Reaper Dave. Good morning. Good morning. Yeah, Kiri, sometimes she doesn't get all of her business done in the morning, and then we have an emergency midway in the stream, but hopefully she'll go to sleep. She was just chewing her bone, and we won't have a problem. But yeah, it's painting bone today, guys. So, and then that's when I discovered when I was looking, and this is why it's also a Monday, is when I was looking in my giant box of paint, I don't actually have a lot of the bone colors. So I'm like, oh no. So I'm going to have to talk about them, and I do have one bone color, and that's the one we're going to use. Yay. But I could talk about how all the triads are different for you guys. Yeah. Reaper peeps are in a meeting right now, so they're hashing out the very important subject of ReaperCon. Justin said they've got a lot of ReaperCon work to do this morning, so that's why we are flying without a Justin. So I'm going to get my palette in frame. We're back to well palette today because for bone, you need to be able to do very thin lines, thin consistent lines if you want to do it something other than base coat wash dry brush, so we're going to go there. One moment. Let me see here. Dave, no, he's not even not invited to the meeting, Kernico. Dave is probably relieved if he's not in the meeting. It's an escape. Looking for the hidden cameras. All right, guys, let's talk about the bone. So this is the Bone Garden, and I think it's a Bob and Julie sculpt. We have Artist Unknown a lot on the tags these days, and I'm not sure if that's just because a lot of people worked on it, because usually if more than one person works on a sculpt, it could be like an unknown tag, but it looks a lot like a Bob and Julie effort, though I could be wrong on that. So in any case, this is cute. So this pack gives you a lot of little skulls. A big kind of like a goat skull, and then a cow skull, always useful for those desert bases, and then just a little kind of maybe a dragon skull, I think, and it gives you like the mandibles to put on the bottom jaws if you want them, a couple of the skulls, so that's kind of cool. And then it comes with this awesome bone pile, which is just good for scenery. Looks to have a draconic kind of creature, or perhaps a manticore or something of the sort on it. It has a wing. And it's nice for our purposes because it's got a shoulder blade, it's got some ribs, got some long bones, and it's got a skull. So it's actually a good way to practice doing bone. If I don't drop it on the floor. That is not a good way to practice doing bone, by the way. I must get it. I must retrieve it. There, I'm good. And I must, write the stuff that I just knocked over in retrieving my bone pile. There we go. All right. Now it's a Monday. It's a Monday. There we are. Oh, of course. Alpha Gigi. Yeah. I mean, when I paint my Maldorcar, I'm using a brush. I'm not using an airbrush. Yeah. No point. Here, hold on here. Let me get this soda. So essentially, Maldorcar for base coating, I'm just going to use a big brush, just like I used when I was doing the troll, except maybe even a little bit bigger. Since I used to paint canvas, I have a number of brushes that are just big flats that are good for covering. The purpose of a large flat brush is to cover a lot of ground. And so in painting dragons, they are very useful because the base coat, you're covering a lot of ground. That said, if you want to really do it fast and also put in some shading and highlighting like super fast and save you all that angst, airbrush is definitely recommended. But if you don't have an airbrush, or it's just outside of your comfort zone and you just don't feel like pushing yourself at that time, by all means, just go and get a big synthetic that's real cheap at Hobby Lobby or at Michael's or whatever, and use that for your base coating. Let's see here. You've missed too many streams? No, Threads of Fate, there is no, we're always welcome back. It doesn't matter how long you've been away. Oh noes. Yeah, I'm not getting the dropped frames message on my OBS, so it's not on my end there. Yes, and thank you for the sub. Yay, Threads of Fate, you're back! You're really back now. Yeah, Mathophile, you do want it. I mean, I've got they sell little portable hoods that will just kind of blow the mist into a padded filter, and then you can buy extra filters and everything. It's just a little desk-sized hood. It's actually pretty darn ingenious. I think Master Airbrush sells them. But I've got one of those. So it's still not as good as a big blower, but it's definitely for small hobby stuff, especially if you just make a point to blow the airbrush in the direction of the filter, it's just fine. I definitely would wear a mask. I have an RZ mask. This doubles as a coronavirus mask, guys, when you want your snazzy mask. So RZ masks, as you can see, I have a purple one. These are nice. They have a replaceable filter. And they have come in various sizes. They Velcro together at the back. They're snaztastic. They've got little breather things. So mask is recommended. Do not breathe paint fumes. You don't want to breathe atomized paint. Yeah. Painting bones. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm more comfortable with brushes too, Kuronico, but it's not a should have used. It's never should have used. It doesn't matter. Did you get the job done? Awesome. Without too much angst? Fantastic. There is no should. Never use should. Should is just a toxic word. It's like, just do it the way you want to do it and be happy with it. Don't let anybody tell you you're doing it wrong or that you should have done it a different way. That's not it. All that matters is the result for you. Yeah, exactly. Well, you can use your RZ mask also for airbrushing. They have a fine enough carbon thing. Yeah, we all do have masks now. It's just some masks, like the RZ is nice because I think it picks up stuff down to a micron or so, or there's a certain like threshold where atomized paint, will be caught, as opposed to, some other stuff like being out in the I guess though that Corona masks, like an official like rebreather mask, like not just a piece of cloth over your face, any of those would be fine for airbrushing for safety's sake, and anything is better than nothing, right? So yeah, Threads of Fate. Cloth mask goes so far, but I mean cloth mask is good because obviously for virus things, if you cough or sneeze, it really holds the particulate from getting out into the air. But when you're talking about actually blocking microparticles from getting into your lungs, then you want something a little more official. There is no wrong or cheating, although I do tend to call some things cheaty, but that's because it makes it so easy, and I'm just, like devastated that I didn't use it before. Yeah, seriously. Everybody likes to clickbait by saying, you must do this one tip, or, you should have done it this way, or something like that. It's like, seriously, people? All that matters is the result. That's all. That's it. Yeah, we do not want to paint our lungs. Use a mask respirator. Yes, exactly. Well, it's all schools of thought, right, Mathfile? Whenever people care passionately about a topic, and this happens in dogs, and it happens with children, and it happens wherever you find a topic that people are passionate about, you will find those opposing mindsets that are convinced, they have a very strong worldview and very strongly believe that their way is the way, right? And that everybody else is just wasting energy or time. And then of course you get people incited, right? Like I said, it's the clickbait. Then people use it to just grab people's attention. And so they're manipulating you. So it's just, at that point, it's just, I mean, you will always get those people who have strong opinions about a subject that they care about. So that's where those come from. And it's inevitable. It doesn't matter. It's in art. It's in anything we care about with humans. Our brains are polarizing. It's what we like. We like right or wrong. We like black or white. Shades of gray, some of us, really can teach ourselves to look at shades of gray, but, it's not our favorite mode of thought. It hurts. All right, well, let's do the wet palette just for quick base coat here. I am using, let's talk about bones. So my favorite bone triad is Morning, and we got derailed. Kiraniko says, my nurse friend says if you can blow a candle out while using a mask, it's not blocking anything. But anyway, yeah, and we're going to work with my favorite bone color today. And I discovered that I failed this morning because it is definitely a Monday, and that I thought I had a bag of off-whites with all sorts of bone colors in it, and now I cannot find it in my big paint thingy. So I'm afraid that my bone color selection is only the color that I most like. And that is Graveyard Bone. So the reason... Yeah, just go with it. All that matters is the result. Do you get an awesome result? Rock it. Graveyard Bone is my favorite because it's kind of between all of our other bone triads. The other bone triads, actually, I guess I do have the other bone triad, at least one of the other bone triads, but I think I don't have the aged bone triad. So our first bone triad is, of course, aged bone and polished bone and bone shadow. And those colors are very grayed out. And what I was really going for there was to make a bone triad that was really gray, like rotting bone. Because most other bone triads I saw in the market from other companies were very warm like this. And although ivory and bone do tend to yellow over time, there are conditions where you don't want that color. And there's also color schemes where you don't want that color. I mean... if you've got a really kind of muted and evil and grayed out color scheme, you don't necessarily want happy yellow bone in it, right? So the first triad, that's, let me get out a sticky note and write it down for you on camera. The first bone triad, you can find it's 9058 to 9060. And those are very grayed out. The next triad that we have, I went the opposite direction. I went to the yellow end, the ivory end. So this is aged bone, and it's also a very incredibly good triad for parchment. So keep that in mind. This is 9142 to 9144, and that's yellowed. In fact, the midtone for it is called yellowed bone. And creamy ivory, as you all know, and stained ivory are some of my favorite colors for underpainting for shading white. They're just a nice creamy neutral. So, oh, Triad. Yeah, Alpha GG. Essentially, Master Series Core is organized in triads, sets of 3. So, 9058, 9059, and 9060 are a triad. That means you can actually buy them in a separate package. One of them is the midtone, one of them is the shadow, and one of them is the highlight. And these are all made to work together so that if you're not comfortable with mixing, you can use them that way. So, hey, Sephiroth, good to see you. Yeah, more than that is the entire core Master Series line is based on it, Twisted Oma. It's based on triads. Most triads will be a shadow, midtone, and highlight. Some of them are a little bit different, like the liners triad is all different colors of liner. The off-whites is all different off-whites. So sometimes, especially later on in like Kickstarters, that it isn't really triads anymore. I kind of try to stick to a theme at that point, but we've done so many triads that then it's hard to find a highlight and a shadow for a color without crossing over into something you've already done in another triad. So that's why that happens. Let's see here. Yes, thank you, Mevwin, as well. That's as Mevwin says. Yeah, no problem, Alpha GG. It's no biggie. The other lines, the HD, which is now canceled, and the Bones paint line from Reaper, and the Pathfinder paint line, all those don't have triads. There are several series in there that you can use as triads, actually. If you look at, for example, the reds or the oranges and yellows in the Bones line, you can use, there are several sets of 3 in there that you could make, but it's not officially set up that way like it is with Master Series Core. It's one of the strengths of Master Series Core. We were the first people to do the triad, and it really helps when you're a new painter and you just are not sure about mixing and you want an easy shadow and highlight for something. Let's see here. Let's see. I am missing chat. I must scroll up just a little bit. Sweet, sweet. Okay, we're good. Just making sure. Yeah. All right, cool. Excellent, excellent, excellent. All right, so now we're to my favorite triad. And I find this really useful because the Graveyard Bone Triad, which was a Kickstarter triad, it was one of our first Kickstarters, is actually my favorite because I set out having these two, which were very specific usages, the grayed out and the yellowed. I wanted something in between. I wanted a true neutral bone that I could use with any color scheme. Because if you use the grayed out one with really bright colors, it doesn't look right. And if you use the yellowed one with really, really muted color scheme, it also might look weird. So I wanted something right down the middle that you could utilize. So I essentially mixed those two together and got the Graveyard Bone Triad. So 9271 to 9273, middle ground, neutral. Very useful. It's useful even, it's not as good for parchment, right? Because parchment yellows, so you want a yellower base for that. But for scrolls and stuff that you're not like trying to get that antique yellow parchment or book pages thing where you want a fresher look, Graveyard Bone and its compadres actually work just fine for that. They would also work as a base for white. Just like the Ivory Triad does. It'll be less warm. So essentially what you might think about is the character of the model. Like when I'm going for Creamy Ivory, oh, and also the other colors on the figure. When I'm going for Creamy Ivory, I'm usually using it on Templars for their white because they've got that usually I'm doing Templar Blue. And so I want something really warm and good because they're a good aligned army, for example. Whereas for Graveyard Bone, I might go, anybody who's more ambiguous that I need to do white on, I could go for Graveyard Bone. It's not as warm. It doesn't send that message visually. So think about your colors like that also. The other thing is, of course, that we've talked about color theory before and how blue, yellow, and red go together and you can use any two. So in that case, this is your yellow. So like if I'm using Templar Blue, then I can go with Creamy Ivory and then I've got blue, yellow. And I don't even have to introduce red if I don't want. Those will work together. So when you've got a very yellowish color, even if it's not a yellow per se, if it's a brown or a cream, keep in mind that it works like color. It works color theory wise, right? This counts as a yellow if it looks yellowy on the model. So it's not always color theory isn't always about primaries or bright colors. It's often about doing subtle things with muted colors, and you can get some of the most beautiful color schemes that way. Okay. Yeah, Gigi, keep the questions coming. It's all good because you know what? If you're thinking it, then there are at least 5 other people watching this stream who are also thinking it. So when you give me an opportunity to answer a simple question like that, it's good because sometimes it's easy to think that because a lot of the people in chat have been around for a while. It's easy to lose track of those simple things like triads and realize that people don't necessarily know what I'm talking about for that. So that's a great reminder, and thank you. Let's see here. Yeah. But they're pretty good around Mountain View where I am, Sofaroko. I mean, I'm right next to a park, and when I go out there, I'd say 80% of the people are in masks, even outside, even though when we can social distance. I don't think it's as important there, but, again, this is a personal beliefs thing. People feel strongly about it, so... And of course, it's law in California to do anything inside. You've got to wear a mask now, so I'm okay. I was doing that anyway. Let's see here. Oh, do we have too much yellow and orange? Yeah. It's probably the color, the shifting. Not so much in Texas. Yeah, I believe you, Image. All right, so there. Now you can see these colors more. Because I moved to only having a neutral background. Remember, when you're doing your miniatures photography, this is equally important. Because your camera may want to shift depending on what your background is. So you can see the difference plainly now in these. At least on my camera and my monitor, I can. This is much more yellow, and this is much more gray. But it's still, I wish I had aged bone around, because if I put that up, you guys would see how much more gray that is. And then, because if you just look at this in isolation, next to gray objects, it looks very warm, right? It looks very yellow. It's only when you add a more yellow color in that then it starts to look very gray. So this is all the relativity of color, and it works this way on miniatures too. Whatever you put it next to, it's going to work that way. So if you're working with yellows on your figure and you need a white or an off bone color, I would say go with Creamy Ivory instead of Graveyard maybe, or unless you want this to look very gray or neutral. Alrighty. Do, 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 do. Yeah, here the restaurants are only open outside Mather File. In fact, the cool thing about where I live is that the city of Mountain View just closed down kind of their main street that's full of shops and restaurants, shut it down for the summer so that it could just, the restaurants could expand out into the street and make adequate outdoor seating that was social distanced. So now you can go and you can eat outside, and outside you're not as worried about the mask thing. So it's a little bit better than being in a contained environment, at least. It's pretty cool that the city decided to do that to help the restaurants, though. We order from the Indian place here all the time. It's really tasty. All right, good. So let us set about doing some bone. Let us find a shadowy color. So you can use any shadow color with any brown really to shade bone. You probably want to match kind of your shading color to your triad. I mean, you can use the shadow like bone shadow or stained ivory. Do I have stained ivory? Yeah, I do. All right, so this gives you an idea of the difference between a shadow and a highlight in one triad. Just trying to make sure I'm not losing paint questions. Yeah, there really are a lot of good Thai and Indian restaurants here, Xandercles. I am so spoiled now, especially because there was like no good Indian place right near me in Denton. I kind of missed that. There was a decent Thai place though. I did miss it. Alrighty. So this is the difference that you get between your highlight and your shadow. So it's not. It looks like it's not as much as it is, actually. If you put these down outside the bottle, remember the bottles are kind of fogged, guys. It's not a clear plastic. So if you really want to see what the color looks like, you got to put a drop down. And you'll see that usually colors look a little darker outside of the bottle. So putting these next to each other here, this is stained ivory and creamy ivory. You can see that there is actually a dramatic difference here between these two colors. Let's see here. Yeah, exactly, Twistodoma. That's just it. The restaurants can stay open. People are employed. Yeah, for sure. Because it's kind of that dance, right? You got to do it. And I feel a lot safer with not wearing a mask to eat if I'm outside. So, yeah. So there you've got your difference right there as far as the average difference. But the thing is with Bowen, as with everything else, contrast is king. So it does pay to go a little darker. My next, let me see if I know I've got it here somewhere. Where is it? Yeah. So if you want to kind of expand your triad and go a little darker with it, here are the ways you can go. And maybe I'll write this down for you guys. Where is my, there it is. So, Kiri's got, we got dog emergency. All right, guys, I'm going to leave you for a second. Entertain yourselves, okay? Ask some good questions or talk about stuff, and I will be right back. I'm going to out the dog. 5 minutes. Boing. All right. We should hopefully have a safely evacuated dog. Settle, young lady. Settle. You've got a bone. You've got a ball. You've got all these things. Settle down. Come on. I am looking. Oh, you're all talking about ReaperCon. Good, good, good. Excellent. Yes. Yeah, I mean, I like to look on the bright side of virtual conventions and stuff. It means that a lot of people who normally couldn't afford to travel or who wouldn't have the time or have a scheduling conflict can actually attend. So I think it's a good thing too. Alrighty. So, as I was saying, you usually do want, at least I usually do want, a lot more drama in my bone. I like it to go a lot darker with it, especially when it's going to be, like, dirty bone and stuff. So, oh, fun. Woohoo. I don't know why we're talking about mummy dust, but okay. Anyway, this is a secret triad, or quadrad, as you were. But if you want to go darker with your bone colors and add some more darker browns to the shadows, you could go straight from the stained ivory into the shield brown triad, because all of these work all in a row, as you can see. And so you could all the way go all the way down to wood stain brown if you want. And I mean, I actually use wood stain brown as a wash over bone if I need to do fast stuff with skeletons. So for sure. Yay, virtual, exactly. So make a mental note that if you want an even broader triad, like you could go with this triad then, or you could go with that triad then, or you could go with all of it. But that's kind of a thing that a lot of people don't know, is that driftwood brown actually is a great shade for stained ivory, and so you can go that way. It's excellent. Alrighty. Let us put some bone down. Of course, since I have no fear of mixing, and in fact regularly reach for mixing related things, I reach for a very dark brown usually. Kiri, what are you doing? Settle. Now. No, you can't go out and get your water. No, you can't go out and bug David. No, settle. Settle, little dog. She's just ridiculous. Usually she snoozes like all through the stream, and today she's just like, nope. All right, I'm going to keep a little bit of brown around, I think. Maybe... Oh, I know what would be great with this. What is another brownish color that we use a lot? Actually, it's the desert colors. So desert sand. Do I have desert stone? I know I do. There it is. Yeah, so there. Let's do that. So desert stone and desert sand are also a great shading color for bone. Let's see here. Hello, everybody. Hey, Valandar. So we're going to use this one. The reason I like graveyard bone is because it is more neutral. I can use it with anything. I can take it more gray if I want to shade it with a gray color. I can take it more yellowed if I want to highlight it with something like linen white. So all of these things are lovely things, and we'll go with the wet palette for base coating, and then we'll go from there. So I'm going to put some graveyard bone and desert stone and probably a bit of brown liner up there. I think we're not going to go with walnut this time because walnut has just so much black in it. I think we're going to go for a more conservative brownish black color. Brown liner is not quite so strong. It's naturally translucent. I like to have really dark shadows under my bones because if you have a pile of bones in the cracks, it's going to be quite dark. Wherever dirt is going to hover. So we have quite a bit of drama then on our palette. That's quite a bit of difference there. And if you want, one of the reasons that I would use, say, brown liner here where I wouldn't necessarily use it with the Ivories Triad is, if you'll recall, it's the interrelation of yellow and black. Remember that when you're dealing with a very yellow color, and that includes like the Ivory Triad, and you add black to it, you can go green. So when you are working with a very dark shadow for bone, then I tend to only go very dark if I'm using an already grayed out color that doesn't have as much yellow in it. Then I know that it's going to go gray instead of green. I can get away with it. Let's see here. Yes, Reaper is in Texas, North Texas. Yeah, that's why the Texas. All right, I think I'm gonna actually use just a humongous brush for the first. I mean, honestly, for base coating most of this, you could use a small flat, or you could use a gigantic flat and just go crazy. Let's do. Is this precise enough to let me do what I want to do? No, whatever. Okay, we'll go with our large one Raphael, which I've lately liked a lot. And I could. You know what? Not fast enough. Nope, you're not fast enough, Raphael. Sorry, gigantic synthetic brush to the rescue. Because gigantic synthetic brush is going to let me get this whole bone pile covered very quickly. And I'm just going to do it everything, over the dirt and everything, because, you know, there's no point. I can always paint over the dirt with a brown color later. I just want to get a good base coat on this so that I can do some, say, wet blends, shading, show you guys how I highlight long bones. Bone is, again, something that it pays to have photo references for. Again, anytime you're doing something natural, especially for skulls, because with skulls, you kind of not want to know where the seam lines are in the bone. And if you don't have that already in your memory, then you're going to want a reference for it. I always want to use a reference just because I think I know, but this is more like a cat skull. This might be a manticore or a dragon or something, and so I'm thinking it's more like a cat skull. I want to look at a cat skull so I can see where the lines are, because they're not always sculpted on the skull. But putting in the seam lines on the skull where the different plates of the skull come together can be a nice realism touch. There we go. Now we are all in the graveyard bone. Let me push this back, get in focus. Give me your bones. And we'll get a little closer. There we are. Good deal. So now we're hovering around this area. Here I might actually take this. Oh no! It is a Monday. It's a Monday. It's not a blorf, but it's a Monday. When you drop the model that has wet paint on it on your jeans. Thus, you know, giving you an excuse to buy a new pair of jeans, but still, would rather not. We'll switch to a smaller brush. Inara, this is, okay, so I'm afraid, Inara, I talked a lot about bones triads earlier that you missed, so you may want to just go back, because I talked about the strengths and weaknesses of all of these bone triads, but right now we are working with graveyard bone. And I've decided to switch it up and to not use a standard triad, and the reason for that I was talking about earlier. So Desert Stone is going to be one of my shadows. I'm going to go down to Brown Liner as well, because I like a lot of contrast in my bone, especially when you've got a heaped up pile of bones like this, where you really want to emphasize some of this detail. I am going to switch to a smaller brush. By smaller, I mean just smaller than my huge honkin' brush. I'm going to do a little bit of wet blending and bring in some shadows underneath these bones. I actually want them to go pretty dark. Want everything to stand out. And I'm going to be shading the bones themselves with these dark colors as well. Let me get my glasses on. So now we're getting to the point. Hey, Crawly Hamster, thank you for the resub. Yeah, no problem, Inara. I like to warn people when it's like, you know, I could tell you, but you're going to miss a lot of context. All right. So really, I paint bone probably with a lot more detail than other people do. Especially on my old Warlord Undead skeletons that I painted for the gallery eons ago. I like to have really dark shadows. I like to show striation and fissure crack lines along the bones. I like to have a lot of detail on the long bones. Otherwise, I think it's like I kind of feel about bone like I feel about wings, where you're either going super quick on it or you're going super labor intensive on it, and it all just the only way it matters is, you know, is what kind of effect you want. Like, how much time are you willing to throw into it? It really is kind of like that. Because you can do bones quick and dirty, which is how most people do them. or you could actually spend some time on them, which gives you a much more pleasing result. But when you've got a horde of 120 skeletons to paint, is definitely not practical. So it really depends. The sort of technique that I'm going to do on these long bones here is definitely a technique that I would reserve for, say, bigger showcase models where you want the mini to look really good and you don't have to paint 100 of them. You have to paint 100 of them, go quick and dirty. At that point, it's self-defense and sanity. Retaining some of your sanity points. Let's see here. So just a little bit of shading to make the bones stick out a little bit better here. I would probably set up the entire bone pile like this, with just a quick kind of monochromatic shading technique to bring in some darker shadows and make the bones stand out really well. Before I went in and did everything. A lot of this is stone too, but as you can see, as I mix my graveyard bone with my brown liner, I am getting a gray color that's just fine for stones. So this works, this wet blend is actually working out just fine for that. So now my challenge will be to make the bones stand out a little bit, but with highlighting I should be able to do that really well. I'm also pulling out a little bit of my, my desert stone. Sometimes you want a little more water to make sure that this stuff kind of pools and gets around. So I think this week, the bones one, we'll see how long it takes me to do a good job on the bones thing here. But this week we're probably going to work on the dumpster model. Like I want to do some chipped paint and some rust and all sorts of weathering effects later this week on the dumpster model. So I'm going to be working on putting that together and cleaning it later today for you guys. I'm kind of excited. I've wanted to do that for a while. Do some graffiti, you know, some freehand graffiti on it too. I figure on each side we'll do a different thing, and maybe we won't do it all in a row. Maybe we'll do a dumpster day every week. I don't know. Depends on how excited and fun I think it is. All right, so we're getting this guy. Now you see how I've put in a bit more of the desert sand. It's gotten a lot warmer over here than it is over here. If I decide that I like it, and this is something that I would do, right? I'd mess around with the colors and see. If I decide I like this warmer, browner earth color, then I just grab a little bit of it and put it over in my areas over here too. And this is where wet blending is just really useful. You can just go and add in this color and make everything match. It's all good. There we go. I've got a big blob of dark over there, so I need to deal with that. Oh, I think I painted his little paw. Yep, I did, but it's okay. You can highlight his little paw. When you're wet blending, another trick you can do is take a tiny bit of dark paint on the tip of your brush and just run it around so that you get kind of an instant blend. If you point your dark tip against the bone, you can get almost like a subtle shading there. Ever have a mini from what I've seen? Ever finish a mini? Alpha Gigi, my goal is not to finish a mini on this stream. This stream is really for tips, and I did finish a mini on stream, at least like mostly, back when I was doing the Wednesday stream. But the point of this stream is to show techniques, like different techniques every day. And for me to finish a model on this stream would mean spending 2 weeks on a single model. So it's just, I don't do it. That's not the point of the stream. The point of the stream is not to show you how to paint an entire troll or an entire bone pile. The point of the stream is to show you like colors and ideas and techniques that you can use to paint your own bone pile. And what we find is if I work on the same model for too long, our viewership really dives. So I mix it up and do different things, but this means that I'm not finishing a model because I'm a very slow painter. By choice, I like to take my time and really enjoy what I'm doing. I don't like to rush. I don't enjoy painting fast. So, and I don't think that's where my strength is. I mean, if you want to see some of the stuff that I do like on my own time, then, you know, I am capable of doing like really cool stuff, but this is stuff I'm doing on my own time, right? So, you know, I have a lot of time to do. When I have a lot of time, I can do an amazing job on things, but on stream, that's not really the goal. The goal is to show you guys how to use the paint, how to utilize certain techniques for certain types of surfaces and things like that. Sometimes it's also to promote a model. But like Rock Troll, I probably will go back to Rock Troll. We may actually eventually finish Rock Troll on stream. But I don't want to do it all at once. I don't want to do it just sticking to Rock Troll for 2 weeks, you know, because then people are going to get bored. Like people who don't care about Rock Troll and who are looking for tips for other things are just going to go, oh, she's painting Rock Troll again. I already saw, you know, episode 3 of this, so I don't need to watch it again. So it's the goal of the show. One second. Hold on. Oh, a physical store for Reaper? Is that what you asked, Alpha GG? Yeah, there's a physical store at Reaper HQ. Yes, Crawly Hamster. It means I have a whole bunch of unfinished minis lying around. And the thing I've been thinking about recently is I could pick up those minis again and do a different part of them for a different demo at some point in the future. Like, I don't just have to toss them aside and never use them again. What I don't want is to have 2 solid weeks of a particular mini. Originally, what my plan was for the unfinished minis was just to auction them off in the ReaperCon auction, so that somebody who wanted, say, an example of painting spots on fur could try to, you know, use their Reaper bucks to win it at the auction, and then they'd have a hand-painted example of that. And some of the models like that I did get close to, I thought I might get auctioned off on my Patreon. But if I put a lot of time into finishing them on my own time, like Spirit Beast might get there. There we go. We've got some nice, see how that makes all your bones stand out nicely to get a nice dark shadow around the outside of them. And you don't have to be super neat. You can be a bit messy about it. Hold on. I am trying to catch up. Yeah, there's the Patreon plug. You know, we can't do it digitally, Nomad Zeke. That's why I just trashed that idea. So now what I probably will do is I will go back and look at all the models that I painted. And I still have, like, every model that we've done on this show for the past, you know, year and a half. And I'll probably go back to some of the earlier ones, because chances are most of you haven't watched all of the episodes, and I can always revisit something and do a different section of the model. Like, there's some fire giants and stuff that I was working on, and I've got another one actually to start up. But more and more I'm thinking about, like, having kind of a stable of 6 or 7 or 8 models that I kind of go back and forth on working on, and don't just, you know, do 2 episodes on a mini and toss it in the bin. Although, to be fair, Bed Mimic only took like 2 episodes to finish or so. And he just has his floor that needs to get done. But I guess I could talk about doing wood boards on his floor and finish him for good. But yeah, so it's like different shows have different goals, and this one is really not an Ann Paints a Project show. The Wednesday show, back when I was doing it, was an Ann Paints a Project show. We did nothing but a dragon, or 2 dragons, for a year and a half or so. And although it was fun, I'll tell you, I didn't enjoy it as much, because I was always talking about the same things, right? So for me, I feel like maybe you guys don't get as much out of something like that, right? Because if you've seen 1 episode of Dance of Death, you've seen a lot, you know, a lot of what I'm doing all over the dragons. So, yep, yeah, you can find it all on YouTube. Claws are so easy, though. Claws are so easy in our... Just streaks. NMM Clockwork Dragon. Yeah, good luck on that, Mathophile. People have done it. I mean, there have been several entered into ReaperCon. It's a very difficult model on one hand, but on the other hand, it's not that difficult, because the thing about... And I'm going to start mixing up some paint in my well palette now, because it's time to do some actual bones. The thing about the Clockwork Dragon is that it has a lot of flat planes, which is actually easier to do NMM on than rounded surfaces in a lot of ways. So, do not despair. I don't know if I want to go warm. I think I'm going to go cold. Do not despair. Although you will have to look at every surface and try to envision where the light is coming from, where it is hitting, and where it is reflecting. And it is definitely not for the faint of heart, but it could be worse. What I would almost recommend is trying to do one surface of it, like a foreleg or something, to kind of get into the mindset of NMM and see if you want to, like, see if it's very bad or if you think you can persevere. Oh yeah. Hold on. Yeah, Alpha. I did do Rocky. I did do the one of the little tiny chibi dragons. Where are you, Rocky? He might be within reach. Yes, he is. So GG, I was doing Rocky. I was working on his leg there and trying to make it look like the light was reflecting off of his leg there. So that's all paint work. His leg is mostly done. But again, if I spent time on doing this whole model, like, and we did his face a bit too. We did his eyes. We tried to make him look friendly on one side and not so friendly on the other. So settle down, Kiri. So yeah, this is the fun of being able to switch up my subject matter. So I added a little bit of brown liner into my graveyard bone. As you can see, it went very gray. It actually looks a lot more like aged bone now. I'm going to mix this up. I do like to start bone pretty dark. Should we go very dark with it? I might. Why not? Why not go extremely counterintuitively dark with it? Kind of feel... Yeah, and NMM is really, like I said, it's a conceptual technique. Having certain techniques, being good at certain techniques like layering will help you do better NMM, because smooth blending, unless the surface is very textured, is definitely something that makes NMM look more real. So that's why I used to tell people, you might want to wait on NMM until you've got your blending better, because you might not be happy with it if your blending isn't up there. But nowadays I tell people to just muck around with lighting and figure it out. And that doesn't matter if you have smooth blends or not. Smooth blends are just going to make your NMM look, more real on smooth surfaces. But it's not necessary for you to start mastering the concept. So I'm going to put really dark shadows between these bones. So alright, I've got this bone, this one long bone, kind of blocked in. And I've got some dark shadows. I like to put some definite dark shadows on the bone where I see cracks or fissures or rough surfaces. And I definitely pay attention to the light source when I'm doing that, so there's going to be more dark on the underside of the bone. So this is me blocking in bone, long bone. Long bone. Long bone is long. Alright. Looks pretty good. I've got it kind of blocked in. Can make more of a divot there. Divot there. Alright. Got long bone marked in. That's a Patreon goal if my Patreon ever gets up to huge levels, Max Styles. Because the number of hours it would take to write and photo minis and paint minis for that book would be, like, it would take a year's salary. Like, it would take so long. I mean, having done some tutorial stuff for, like, say, the Warlord book and all that took a long time, and that painting guide for the Warlord book was maybe, 14 pages, 20 pages? Not nearly what it would be for a big book. So now I'm going to take some of this graveyard bone, and I'm going to hit the long highlighted parts, like the parts that are facing the light. I'm going to bring those back in lighter. I'm going to leave a little bit of this darker color here and there because bones have definite striations and they're not always just smooth and cylindrical. So I like to do my bones kind of a little bit stripy. Let me move this off of here and see if I can No, actually, it's better with the palette. Better with the palette. Yeah, there you go. Now you can see. So I'll actually thin down my shadow a little bit. And for bones that have been lying around a while, I like to kind of introduce cracks and fissures into them. Yeah, the problem is just time, guys. It's just time. I'd have to be assured of being paid for my time, and that means probably we'd have to kickstart it. But that's why I was saying I put it kind of up as a big Patreon goal, because if I'm making that much money on Patreon, I can actually afford to take that time. Right now, I cannot afford to take that time. I have to be doing commission work and, you know, a lot of other stuff to make sure that I can survive. Since I know I work for Reaper on stream, but this is a very small portion of what keeps me going. It's definitely a portion I love, and it's a portion that I'm very thankful that Reaper has kept me on. But I do need to do other things to make sure I make enough money to live. So the Patreon is part of that, and if we get up to a higher number on the Patreon, then the book is definitely a thing. I mean, people have been asking for a painting book from me for over 20 years, to give you an idea. It's just so time consuming to do those tutorials. I mean, if you guys knew how much time I put into like a standard PDF for my Patreon, you'd be shocked. Just to make sure that I've got appropriate, you know, I think about the topic a lot. I outline it. I kind of brainstorm it. You know, I spend a lot of time then actually writing and editing it and taking photos for it or doing swatches. And sometimes I change my mind in the middle of it. So now I'm putting like deep grooves and fissures in this bone. Like, here we go. So I'm kind of reintroduced a crack along this area, and I actually want to put kind of a jagged break in here. So this is a mixture of brown liner and graveyard bone, and it's heavy on the brown liner. But the great thing about brown liner is that it is a really translucent paint. So it's not as bold as, one second. There you go. It's not as bold as like walnut. I can make it go translucent and do things like this tiny little crack. And those things really help to bring out the character of like broken bones. Here we go. There we go. Perfect. Oh, let's see here. Inexact Dactinara. I just don't like it. It dirties everything, and I don't have control over it. If you want to do quick and dirty bone, yeah, do it that way. Yeah, exactly. Inara is correct. Writing book is a full-time job plus overtime. The shadow is brown liner plus my graveyard bone color. That is my base bone color. But yeah, I mean, the thing about doing... Okay, if I do a brown liner wash over all of these bones, it's going to darken it a lot. And then I'm going to have to go over every bone with graveyard bone. And then I'm going to have to go back and do my shadows because I didn't have any control over where they went. So essentially... the wash just dirties. I don't like washes because they dirty everything up. Then I have to go back and like pick out everything again, and then I have to do what I'm doing here. So for me, washes are an extra step. They make more work, not less, in my experience. I used to use them a lot. And then I came to the conclusion that they just made more work for me in the long run. So I just don't like it. I also don't like the way they make things look dirty. I think it's Margaret who actually, it's Francis maybe, or Margaret. One of you guys had the same experience where you just did not like the look of washes. And it ruined your enjoyment of the model. That's kind of how I am. I really don't like just randomly putting shading all over everything. It doesn't feel right to me. I'm going to grab some white and mix it in with my graveyard bone since I do not have the actual highlight for this triad. I'm making it up. The fictional cover for my fictional book, Twisted Oma? Yeah. Alright, let's go back and do this. But yeah, I mean, you can totally do a wash over the whole thing, and it will do it quick. And if you enjoy that, and if you think it gives you better results, then awesome. The thing that it does do, though, remember, is that if there are faults or not great areas of the sculpt anywhere that you are washing, you're going to accentuate those things when you wash. So anything that isn't sculpted, like, really good, that has flaws, you're going to accentuate that instead of disguising them. You're going to have to do a little bit more work on that. Although, whereas here you can catch them right at the beginning. I might need to go a little stronger with this. There we go. Yeah, this is having a hard time. There we go. That's a little better. Now you can see the highlights. It's hard when you're painting off-white, just like it's hard when you're painting near black. The camera wants to not see all my fancy highlights. But I like to do really streaks with the highlight and streaks with the shadow. Mostly when it comes to mini painting, I think I'm just a control freak. Washes are very uncontrolled and not precise, and so I don't enjoy them. But everybody is different. So, kind of like that. I could also do kind of a diagonal break. Let's do that. Let's grab some of that. No, I do spot glazes. But spot glazes are not shading. When you talk about spot washes, Max, then I'm just calling that layering, I think, is what it comes down to. Like, if I was taking my shadow here and just painting it into a shadow, like, it's not a wash because I'm not putting it all over everything. I never do a shade where I just put it all over a surface, because then I lose all this. I'd much rather be very precise about where I put, very precise and mindful about where I put my shadows and my highlights. I'd much rather, if I want this whole thing dark, I'd rather paint it dark. There's kind of a spot wash, like an accidental spot wash, where it kind of went into the cracks and got a little poolier there. Poolier, that's a word. But I mean, ideally, that's not what I'm aiming for most of the time. And I probably would take and blend that out and not actually leave it pool. So, like, I want to shade the other side of that rib cage, but I don't want to shade the top. Right. I mean, a spot wash is going to pool like it did there, right? But I don't actually want that necessarily. I'd rather put my shadows, my darker shadows, in there and not have to fight wet paint to do it. And I don't want to wait for it to dry. So, yeah, the answer is probably no, because when I do a spot wash, I immediately wick it off because I don't want it. I don't want that effect. There's little reason for me to embrace that effect because I'm going to change it anyway. So for me, if I leave this to dry instead of taking it off, it just means I have to wait longer before I actually put my real shadows in, which are going to be a lot darker than that wash. Yeah, see, it's still wet. So that guy's just going to sit there for a minute. Yeah, I just don't, I find that I fight then. I've got pooling color that I have to wait for it to dry, and I can't keep working organically if I have to do that. It interferes a bit with what I'm doing. It's just a style thing. I mean, you guys want to do spot washes or utilize washes. There's definitely an area of life where washes work great for you. They just don't work good for me. I used them for years. Keep in mind, I've been painting for a very long time. So I have tried pretty much everything at this point. Including tube paints. So the only thing I haven't experimented widely with are oils on miniatures. But for me, I do not enjoy washes. I don't like what they do, and I don't like how I have to wait for them before I can continue working an area. So for me, they're just not a part of my toolbox that I use really at all. I use wet blending so much more than I use washes. Yeah, it's a stylistic choice. If you like the effect, do it. I mean, it's just, it's just, I don't. So, and you know what? It's okay not to like washes, guys. It's okay to like them, and it's okay not to like them. It's all good. I mean, I think it was Frances, but it may have been somebody else who was talking about how her boyfriend or husband really wanted her to do washes because that's the way you learn to mini paint, right? You learn to base coat, you learn to wash, you learn to highlight. That's the way the layer up the paint kit tells you to do it too. But guess what? If you don't like the way a wash looks, don't do it. Ignore it. Don't do what the paint kit says. Try to do it without. Just paint in your shadows, whatever. I mean, it's good to know how to do a wash, but if you do it and then decide that you don't like it, don't stick with it. It's okay. I mean, I never learned to dry brush. I mean, I knew how to layer before I knew how to dry brush, so I'm still probably not that great at dry brushing, but I also almost never use it. So It's all, your toolbox should have everything in it, but your choice of what you use because of what you like is your own. Yeah, fist bump, Dragon Eye. Boop, there, camera bump. Looks like I'm punching you on the camera, but really that was a fist bump. Well, right. Well, yeah, if you're doing army painting, all bets are off. If you want to finish an army, washes is like where it's at. Except for some models, which are just so titchy that washes don't work very well. I'm thinking Space Marines. But even then, you can get it to work. All right, so I've got some nice long cracks in the bones here. I kind of split this bone. Kind of just, you know, breaking some bones here, putting some fine fissures in them. This is the kind of work, though, that I love to do, right? This is this little fine details and adding little Easter eggs that you maybe don't notice right away, but then when you get up close, you're like, ooh, that bone is cracked. That looks cool, right? So that sort of thing, breaks in bones, can be really fun. I can glaze a little bit probably to make one of these cracks a little less, because this isn't necessarily as much of a crack as that is. That's a real crack. So I can take my graveyard bone and make a glaze with it and kind of take away that crack there, lighten it up. So I do a last spot glazing. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. What you said, Inara. Yeah, quote-unquote contrast paints or whatever you want to call it. They do let you think about shadow placement. Yeah, although there's definitely flaws to the shadow placement that a wash will have you think about. A wash isn't thinking about where the light is falling. It's just putting a wash in the cracks, right? So yeah, if you're totally new to mini painting, absolutely it can help you a lot, because you may not even, you know, it may not occur to you to put a shadow in everywhere where there's a crack, right? But definitely after a certain point, that's why I'm encouraging you guys to like start thinking about light sources early. Don't tell yourself you can't. Start thinking about like Zenith light sources or OSL or NMM, which all those conceptual things rely on thinking about how light is falling. Washes will not help you to do that. In fact, sometimes they become a crutch. For me, I started out that way. I started out painting very much Games Workshop style because that was the examples of good painting that I was exposed to. And so it took me a very long time to start understanding light sourcing. A very, very long time. I think I had actually, I hadn't won a Golden Demon, but like the year after, like I discovered, I figured out NMM the same year I won a Golden Demon. And so I'd been painting for a very long time, not understanding how light falls on a miniature. We'll give him some eyeballs. He's got some cracks already like kind of sculpted into his skull. I left him one line too. So I'm going to take advantage of those. I could look up, hold on. Let me look up a photo reference real quick. Not sure when starter paint set will be in stock. Usually strange, if it's not in stock, it means that we're out of several colors that Sadie has to make, and then she has to put those in a queue with all the other restock colors that are low. So it's dependent on overall production. It's cat skull. I'm gonna look up a photo of a cat skull. Let's see here. Cat skull. Yeah, this is kind of like a kitty, although its eyes aren't big enough. I was hoping to find some images that showed kind of how the skull comes together. But most of these are bleached, so it can be very difficult. That's a nice one because it's got dramatic lighting. Oh, that's not a real skull, but it has some of the planes etched into it. So look for real references that will show you things like how the plates come together in the skull and where shadows should be, right? This is not a cat skull, but it's very similar to a cat skull, so we can see right away that we should have a shadow here, that there's a shadow along this ridge, shadow behind the eye. So things like that. Usually you can also, if you find a good photo, you'll see how the lines of the plates of the skull actually grow together as well. Usually there is a line. But here, this helps me put some intense shadows where there should be. I probably want to shade all of the underside of that skull. I'm trying to get a little bit blocked in. No, when we get it back in, it'll be updated almost instantly, Strange. So it really is. It could take a couple of days, or it could take a couple of weeks. It really depends on how many colors are out of stock. And also it depends on what else is in front of there. If we're behind on stuff like Learn to Paint kits and we've got pending orders for them, then the starter set's going to be a bit. So yeah, sadly it's not very predictable. I would recommend checking back every couple days. Usually when they make a batch of something like the starter set, they're making several hundred. So unless they have a pending order for several hundred, it will be in stock for a few days. At least. So I'd say every couple days, you know, check back. Alrighty, so, well, you can see how that makes it look. And these cracks are maybe a little bit dark, and I also don't have any intermediate shading. So I probably need some secondary shading up here. Did this kind of in reverse. This is why I like to start dark and work light. If I start light and work dark, then I end up kind of reverse putting in all my shadows. Where I'm like, oh, I need a midtone in here that's, you know, not as light as it is up there. And so then I have to kind of paint in reverse, paint like I'm painting watercolor. Which does not necessarily come naturally to me. But as you can see, adding more shadows on that skull makes it look a lot more realistic. Yeah, I mean, you can try to get a paint set from outside of Reaper from a different site. Do keep in mind that the ones at Reaper are the freshest. Right, Max Styles. Yeah, for sure. I mean, everything. Technique is technique. Fill up your toolbox, then decide what techniques you really gravitate toward, which ones you really think are fun, you know, which ones make you light up and really relax and get in your Zen zone. For me, layering with working with fine textures and freehand and layering, that really lights me up. So that's what I really enjoy doing is bringing out the fine touches on a model. Things like doing this crack on this bone are things that I love to do. You know, and to really make this skull look neat, you know, and things like that are and so inexact techniques. Obviously, I love precise techniques. So techniques that aren't as precise don't really get me happy as much as precise techniques do. There we go. I'm just going to add in some more shadow to make his details stand out a little bit more on the skull. You see the skull is looking nicely rounded now because I've left a circular highlight on the top and kind of shaded around it. So that helps to bring out the shape of the piece. But yeah, toolbox. Just build your toolbox. Build your toolbox. Try a whole bunch of different things. Try washes. Maybe you will love them. You can do a lot of very interesting effects with washes if you're varying up your colors and thicknesses. You know, so just make your own thing. Somebody asked a great question. I can't wait till we get to our AMA, the next AMA. I think we were just a little bit over halfway there. But somebody asked, like, how do you develop a style? And that's one of my favorite subjects is painter styles. So I can't wait to talk about that when we get to our next AMA at 60 subs. I think we've got over 30 now. Pretty sure. You guys have tossed a few in today. I'll have to remind Justin to count them up. So now I'm creating that rounded shape. See that? Whenever you've got a rounded surface, make sure that your highlight area is also rounded, and then you can really bring out the details of that area. Got to add in another shadow here on this side of the nose, on the underside here. This has some porous bone down here that's kind of pitted, which is really kind of cool. We can use some stippling to bring out that texture if we want to. Yeah, there we go. All right, Mr. Skull. He's definitely, like, starting to look a lot more real now. keep forgetting where my focal point is. Yeah, there we go. I actually want to get a dark shadow underneath that skull too, to make him stand out even more. I want to make sure that you have a nice heavy shadow to really, that makes everything stick out, right? When you've got a kind of a dark background underneath that area. And if you look at it, there would be a shadow there, right? Because if the light is falling from up top, that shadow would fall right down there, right under the skull, right where we have it. Which is the other thing that I really love, of course, is realism, right? And some people don't. Some people really want a more anime or cartoon style, and that's awesome. I love seeing their work. It's not what I go for, but I still love to see other people's style choices, right? Even if it's not my thing, it's really enjoyable to watch what other people do. Let's see. That, I think, is part of a wing bone under there. I think it's part of this bone. He's curled up. He died curled up, like going to sleep. All right, so let's do that. Let's pick out that bone with some shadows. Doo-doo-doo. So my best advice for mini painting is to learn everything and then see what techniques you really enjoy and gravitate toward those and see what you can do with them. And another thing that I would advise is to look at really good paint jobs that are out there, whether it be on canvas or in miniatures, and kind of try to see what makes those things so cool. Like, what about this painting do I really like? Can I use that somewhere? You know, maybe try to paint a model like one of your idols, or try to use a color scheme or a technique of pattern or lighting that you see in a painting on a miniature. Things like that can really help you broaden your style toolbox. There we go. So I'm essentially just blocking a little bit more dark. Notice that the more shadowy and darker I make my base, the more the bones are just standing out really nicely and looking more real. Well, you probably are going to do a lot of block shading and highlighting with really bright poppy colors and really dark lined shadows. I mean, pretty much look at like there are a lot of figures out there actually that are anime style. Chibi are obvious, but there's also like figures for like video games. Like I have one of the Monster Hunter resin figures. It's the only Monster Hunter thing I own because I don't actually play the game, but she really begs to be painted kind of anime. And of course there's tons of mecha warrior models out there. If you want to try to paint a quote unquote vehicle or a giant fighting robot, as the case may be. And that's a whole world of its own. Those people are insanely good. The people who do the manga and mecha stuff. So there's a whole world out there of that sort of thing. But really what you do is you look at the art style, like look at a lot of anime and a lot of like still shots, especially from anime. And so maybe a lot of manga comics. And kind of like say, okay, what are they doing here? Like, is there a lot of shadows or are they just using mostly highlights with just lines for shadows, you know, and stuff like that. You got to kind of analyze it at that point. Figure out what makes that style tick. And mostly the most useful thing for me in trying to analyze a style is, one, what sort of colors are they using? Are they using really bright colors with a couple of neutrals, or are they using a lot of muted colors? And then second is, how are they doing highlighting and shading? Are there highlights, or is it all kind of just block bright painted? Are there shadows, or are they just lining? You know, are they just using lines for shadows like in cartoons? You know, stuff like that. You know, are the shadows all kind of warm and brown, or are they black? You know, things like that. These are questions you would ask yourself if you're trying to analyze a style that you really liked and wanted to maybe paint a mini like it. I mean, if you really want to like look at, say, painting in a cartoony style that works really well, is look at the Borderlands games, is what people usually say, which is very much kind of blocky highlighting, but some of the highlighting on those in that game is very subtle and interesting. But they just use black lines for their darkest shading. Black lines are blocks of black. So that's a very interesting style to try to duplicate in a miniature. Very comic book. Kerniko, yeah, licenses are evil though. It's Ed really does not like to do licenses, so we do very few, and we usually only do them with companies that we have a very long relationship with, because the problem with taking on a very popular license, for example, is that you have to have everything okayed before you put it out by the company who's giving you the license usually. So there's a lot more. You can't just run with it. You actually need to work with them. So there's a lot more stuff that has to happen before you can actually complete stuff. You also are paying them a license fee, which can be quite sizable, which you're gambling on, right? Depending on how popular you think this stuff will be. And finally, they can yank that license if they're not happy with you. So if you have the most famous example of this going bad in the worst way is Ral Partha. Ral Partha, back in the 90s, as you recall, had the D&D, the AD&D license, right? And Ral Partha made a lot of money off of that AD&D license. Like, it became their primary line. And then TSR yanked it, or WotC. I can't remember who was in charge at that point. But essentially, AD&D decided that Ral Partha, they wanted to do their own miniatures thing, and they no longer wanted Partha to do it. So they yanked the license, and Partha died. I mean, there may have been other reasons for Partha going under at that point, but most people pointed to the D&D license. So when you have a very successful license and then you lose it, because you have no control over that, the best you can do is try to do a good job. And I mean, a lot of the AD&D minis were great, right? You'd think that Partha was doing a pretty good job with it. We don't know, but So you have no control over that. Like, that's the problem with licenses. And the same thing can happen with other stuff like Star Wars. Yeah, I mean, they had other lines, Valandar, but a lot of their bottom line was AD&D. So when that went away, suddenly they lost, 40% or more of their income? Like, just gone in one stroke. So yeah, there was so much in play at that point, Valandar. I mean, if you talk to Ed, he'll tell you people thought that Reaper killed Partha for the longest time, but there was so much going on. Those were turbulent days. So much in the hobby was shifting. And then there was the Fossa thing, and yeah, it was all together. Like, if you really want to have some fun reminiscing times, get Ed going on that. on Reaper Live. I don't know how much he'll want to go into it, because we don't like to talk, about other companies in general. It's just not good policy, but yeah, I mean, it is an example of how licenses can bite you. And I think that Ed has always taken that to heart, and he also wants to he prefers for Reaper to have freedom in what we do as far as what we put out. And so he prefers not to license. Another example is like the Doom minis. Reaper got a good start. A lot of things that supported us back in the early days were licenses, right? Because we had the license from Bethesda to do the Doom models, which we still do for them from time to time, and stuff like that. So it's not that Reaper hasn't done licenses. It's just that we are very conscious of the downside of licensing. Yeah, West End Games, Star Wars, great examples, Isis. Yeah, especially when you get in bed with the big dogs in an industry. It's a high risk, high reward. You hope that you can fulfill their expectations. I'm going to do a crack down here around these little areas of bone that I'm suggesting are chipping, and a little one down here too. So I'm using my dark shadow color when I want to really suggest cracked bone. See it? All around there, which I really love the look of. But yeah, so you always want to be careful with that. It's like, especially when you're responsible for a company, and Reaper, Dave and Ed take the responsibility to we employees so very seriously. Like, they really don't want to make a decision that's going to have to mean that they have to let people go. You know, they're very conscious of being responsible for people's livelihoods. I think even a lot more than any other company is, because they came up from being such a small company. Reaper's really family. They're very much like working for a family, and they have that attitude toward many of their employees, and they're really good people to work for. Here, see those long bones now, and how that little detail comes out. So when you're painting something like this, which is really just a bone pile, right? And yeah, sure, you could just throw a wash on it. You could just, you know, do whatever with it, and just get it done, because it's just a bone pile. But if you want to practice and make it look really cool, then do some little fine details, right? Get some stuff going on. Yeah, Reaper does have a license with Paizo. Yes. Reaper used to have, yeah, that was just really limited though, Nomad Zeke. That was just for a little. I think that Wayne wanted to just have those models created, and so since we had a really good relationship with Wayne, that we just did it as little one-offs. I don't remember. I don't know all the details.
I'm back in time, Miss Anne.
Oh, you're back in time. Yeah, we were just talking about licenses that Reaper has had, and why Ed Hayes licenses, and how they should totally bug him about, like, you know, Ral Partha going under because of D&D and stuff. Ed probably hates me. But yeah, we have a license with Paizo right now. But remember, we have had a relationship with Paizo for a very long time, guys. And we have had licenses that went that went under. Legend of the Five Rings comes to mind. You know, we used to have the license to do L5R, and then we just didn't. So all those models just kind of just went away. So that's the downside of licensing. That's why Reaper doesn't do a lot of it. We'd much rather put out awesome models that are just Reapers for you guys, and not have to worry about them suddenly becoming things that we couldn't produce. There we go. So yeah. So I'm pretty, it's pretty fun. I need to put his, I need to like highlight his teeth. But hopefully you guys can see how that's a little bit more interesting than just throwing a wash on it. And so do be conscious that bones, you know, have a shape, and they're usually not round. They're kind of oblong, and especially after time, they're gonna, you know, get eroded and cracked and discolored and all that stuff. So think about techniques like this, like if you've got maybe a Calidrax or something where it's really big and it's just bones, you know, big huge bones, and maybe introducing some longer shadows and cracks and stuff into some of those bones, and discolorations, you know, like different mottled shadows. It doesn't have to all be just creamy colored or white or bone colored. It can have some serious like shading in parts, things like that. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, Mayfair got shafted by Time Warner over DC Heroes. Yep. Yeah, that's all the stuff that can happen, you know, and that's why we just kind of don't want to do it. We'd much rather just, you know, own our own IP, and not worry about it. Stuff happens. Yeah, if something disappears from the market that was a license, you can be pretty sure that the company just pulled the license. Maybe because they thought they could do it better, or maybe that they just weren't happy, or it didn't make as much money as they thought it would, or whatever. You just never know. And sometimes it has bigger implications, like the DC Heroes thing and the Time Warner thing. That came up with Game of Thrones, I think, a little bit. But Jim at Darksword kept the license to do the Game of Thrones minis because officially they're based on the books and not based on the TV show. But there could have been some pretty, that might have been an interesting time if it had not been able to be delineated like that. So that's why licenses are interesting things. Also, the fact that Darksword had the license to do those miniatures before the TV show became a reality helped. So yeah. But yeah, when it gets into TV IP licensing, then you're starting to get some real serious money back there and some big companies, big conglomerates, and then it can get kind of dicey. And there's not a lot you can do to fight if one of those big companies decides to really make a dust up. So, all right, guys. Well, there you go. We painted some bones today. We got a nice skull kind of going on, and we got some long bones that I'm really happy with cracks in them. So yeah. So at some point later this week, we'll do. I think we're working on a dumpster at some point, and I've got a fire giant. Might go back to troll eventually, but that might be next week. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I'm still messing around. I'm always messing around with this show and thinking about, like I said, going back to some models that we may have done a while ago to see if there are some that I'd like to finish out or do stuff like that. So we'll see. Do we have any questions? I guess it is Justin is here, so we can now look for a raid.
I think I found us a raid.
You found us a raid. Awesome.
Yes. We're going to be raiding a 2D artist. And she is painting some Pokemon fan art. So
awesome! Speaking of anime, okay, guys, go and study Pokemon.
Yeah, it's super cool, guys.
All right, I know we have a lot of Pokemon fans on the show, so because a lot of you play Pokemon Go and other Pokemon games. So I hope you are friendly. Remember that it's when we raid a 2D artist, it's really awesome because it's an opportunity to introduce them to miniatures or ask if they know miniatures or what they are. So it's awesome. All right. Have fun, everybody, and we will be back tomorrow with a different topic, and I hope you all have a great Monday. I hope your Monday is not as Monday as mine. All right? Have a good one, everybody, and thank you for watching.
Thank you guys very much, and we'll see you later this afternoon for Miniature Monday. Keep being awesome, guys.